All right, so I'm going to get started. I thank everyone for being here. I thank especially Biogen and their whole team for volunteering this space and for coordinating all the vendors and the food and stuff. But I think most especially for understanding that the future of transportation is going to be very much the future of urban areas in America and the world, and helping bring that discussion to Cambridge. I want to give a special shout out to my wife, who is always the person, but I think the real brains behind this is my assistant, Mark Gutierrez, and honestly, you guys can all steal him at some point in life, but not for the next couple of months. He has done an amazing job with this, and today marks to me sort of a bookend of. We started last year with a micromobility discussion about policy, and we're having today a micromobility discussion about the actual things themselves. And while the cane wrap people are not here, I met someone yesterday in Kendall Square who is selling wrappers for canes that become fashion accessories and make people more comfortable about using them. And I've got the flyers on my table. And that's the one end, no frill, no technology side of urban mobility. And then on the other hand, just look out the window and we've got every sort of new thing that you could possibly imagine that's self-balancing, self-inflating, self-electrifying, self-everything. And the opportunities that this new type of mobility combined with the old type of mobility brings for us to live differently and more efficiently together in increasingly congested and urban-oriented world, faced with equity challenges, whether it's wealth or whether it's mobility issues or whatever you might name, I think it's phenomenal. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for being part of this discussion. And most people start with a joke. I'll end with a joke, which is there are these two ants in a redwood tree. And ants live about 2 weeks, and redwood trees are the biggest living things on Earth. They live thousands of years. And the one ant says to the second ant, he says, "Hey, is this thing alive?" And he's referring to the redwood tree. And the second ant says, "No, I've been here all my life, and I've never seen it move." And I got to thank Bill and everyone here for having the courage and the imagination to be on that redwood tree and realize that it is alive and helping us truly move forward. So thank you very much. And with that, are you next up? Who's next up? Will. All right, there you go. Speaking of which.
Well, thanks to Craig and Mark and Biomed again, and for having this opportunity.
I'm sorry, I keep saying Biogen instead of Biomed, and I really owe them an apology on that. There's just so much going on in Cambridge, I get confused. Sorry.
Okay. Let me see. Yeah, I'm Will Pong at Pong Robotics. We're developing a mobility aid that. Oh, you record. Okay. We're developing a mobility aid that builds up core strength, leg strength, but also maintains pedestrian-friendly profile. It's no wider than my shoulders and my forward travel direction. We're hoping not to impact a normal pedestrian. Oh, great. Normal pedestrian flow. With this machine. So I've been in quite crowded, slow-moving, fast-moving crowds, and it's worked quite well in that I can control my speed to a crawl. I mean, I've had people with canes and walkers in front of me. I've also been in very congested crowds, and so we make a point of testing this in actual pedestrian traffic. And why do we do this? Well, people, the baby boomers, the biggest complaint, again, is mobility. Pain, arthritis, a number of issues that can cause a sedentary behavior and resulting in a host of expensive conditions. Then you visit your doctor and you're prescribed these pills, and it becomes impossible to keep track of them. So our solution was to apply robotic technology to come up with a balanced solution, something that enhances your mobility but doesn't create muscle atrophy like a conventional scooter or wheelchair. This actually engages your core, your back, your legs. Right about now, about 20% of my body weight is on my legs, and as you get better at using the machine, the way you get it to go faster is you apply more weight to your legs. So eventually, at top speed, about 80% of my body weight is on my legs. So it's a progressive machine. You can start off gently and build. What I describe as downhill skiing. You can actually slalom on the machine. The motion, you can actually get into that skiing crouch at top speed. This fellow, he came up from Georgia to visit us to try out the machine. He really enjoyed the ride, but he's been dealing with chronic back pain for a very long time. So again, and one of our oldest test pilots, I've been using the machine for about 4 years now. We had no intention of actually selling these. These were designed for friends and family. But this was a bystander who saw me testing the machine out in public. He just said this was a solution for him, and so we negotiated how to get him a machine, and he's really done quite well. One of the key issues for him was fatigue. He could walk, stand for short distances, but he'd be exhausted doing so. This restored his ability to get things done without complete exhaustion at the end of the day. We're trying to make it an attractive way to get it, so we're looking at an introductory pricing thing. So let's say, would people pay $10 an hour just to rent this over outside of the Kendall T station? So we're looking at a rental scenario going forward. Obviously we can't, that's not a sustainable business model, but it's something we just like to see if we can get people to, get half a dozen of these machines out on the road. Again, it's a family business. My background is in robotics. We've done service station robots, fire, emergency response, hospital delivery. So this is kind of an offshoot for me right now in terms of what we're headed to in terms of high priority need as I enter that age bracket. And again, we don't do this in isolation. We've had a lot of support from a number of MIT-related operations and Massachusetts organizations. We were just nominated for the 2019 New England Innovation Awards, so we're actively working on kind of promoting the product for that process. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. I have a video. I don't know if the video plays. Okay.
And is that available for people to use test later?
There's we have people sign a liability waiver, but I've been doing a few test rides out there.
Do you make it custom, or I can?
We do have an adjustable version, but it adds some cost to the product. So we're looking at maybe building these small, medium, large, and hoping that that's good enough. I'm sorry. Yeah, you just. Oh, good point. So like at a shopping, be able to rent them at shopping malls also? Oh, yeah, the MFA, great. Science Museum, MFA. I'd love, if anyone's out here, I'd love to talk to someone out there and get a half a dozen of these machines into those facilities. In fact, one of the favorite, this fellow with polio, one of his favorite activities is Peabody Museum and the MFA. You'll often will see him riding around in those facilities. So if I can get these available to the general public, again, $10 an hour. People tell me I should be, maybe 20 is a better number to work with, but something, just to be able to get this into people's hands to give it a try. Those are big operatives, big facilities. Like I said, this is just a quick demo ride that we did over at MIT, just to show kind of the facility, its ability to be used indoors and outdoors. I said, I've noticed that some apartment buildings have very small elevators, hard to get a scooter into. And I said, the idea was to amplify whatever strength you have by using the motors and the batteries in the platform. Yeah. That one has armrests. For people who don't feel secure, the beginner mode would have armrests. Yeah. Hi. Right now, we're limiting them about 3 to 4 miles an hour, but top speed is actually about 12 and a half. So it's walking pace or running pace. but we're kind of limiting them to walking at the moment. As I said, the large tires give you the ability to go over rougher terrain than you would normally. And that's but MIT is a great test because it's a large enough campus and varied terrain. Yeah.
How about snow and ice, wintry weather?
You know, the funny thing is there are snow tires. There are studded snow tires on some of these machines. I don't recommend it for beginners, but yeah, people have taken it to the beach on sandy surfaces. People have taken it out on ice skating rinks just for fun. But again, not recommended. So. Nice thing about it, these are very durable and really just batteries and tires. The only thing that really, ideally, are normal maintenance items. Everything else is sealed. The nice thing about it is they're expensive machines, but they last a long time. So we're thinking that that's why the rental model makes sense. That you may only need it for 2 or 3 years, and then we can turn it over and have someone else have access. Yeah. I mean, ideally you have an elevator, but given the lack of elevator, I have carried these. They're still heavy. They're still 75 pounds. This one is anyway. So it's not ideal. So ideally you should have a ramp or an elevator. Yeah. Hi.
Does it have a removable battery so you can divide it into 2 less heavy?
Yeah, right now they're screws, so you'd have to, you can save yourself 20, 30 pounds by detaching the battery. Makes the lift much easier. I do sometimes do that when I'm feeling lazy and I don't want to lift the whole, the back, you do feel the twinge in the back sometimes, so, right? Okay, well, great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Cambridge. Good afternoon, Cambridge. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Ashley Brown. I am the Government Partnerships Manager for SPIN. And I just want to thank Councilor Kelley, Mark, Biomed for having us here today. We're really excited to be here. So what is SPIN? Let me just see. Oh, there we go. So SPIN operates electric scooters in cities and campuses nationwide. We're largely recognized for our work in consistent cooperation and collaboration with cities. We like to bring dockless mobility to we see dockless mobility as the future. And as we see a decline in young people not really wanting to get driver's license, like when I was 16, I couldn't wait to sign up. And so now we're trying to find another way for younger folks to get around that protects the environment, but also at the same time, for really dense and urban communities, an alternative form to always being in the car. And so in 2018, at the end of 2018, our company was backed by Ford Motor Company, and we're based in San Francisco. We have a diverse team of engineers, developers, urban planners, and we're looking to bring our solution to cities that are looking for a last mile mobility option. We have 5 core values at SPIN. We have a partnership promise that we always stand behind. Number 1, we never launch without permission. That is something we really hold dear. We like to work with cities and towns, universities before we launch. We like to understand the issues, the needs, and the concerns, and how we can work more collaboratively. Number 2, we maintain scooters with our own employees. So all of our employees, from the chargers all the way up, are full-time employees with us. And we believe in hiring local. We usually will find and build our warehouses within the communities that we're serving. Number 3, we share data with our partners, and we see the great value in being a collaborator for communities that are trying to understand where are the areas that we're seeing high pedestrian traffic. Can we share data that will help cities think 5 years, 10 years in the future? And so we like to be really great partners in that regard. Number 4, we scale responsibly. We don't believe if a city allows us to come in and say you get 300 scooters day one, we might start with 100 because we want to see which areas our scooters are being used the most and which areas might need a little bit more attention. We also think about, for high periods of time, whether they're parades or special events that are happening, how we can think more creatively about where to deploy on a given day. And number 5, we safeguard our user data. And so we really spend a lot of time making sure that not only is the data of our users protected, but that as we are sharing and being a great partner with cities, that we're also protecting that information as well. So we believe that both cities and operators have a similar mission, and that's to provide sustainable, safe, and enjoyable forms of transportation. Where we have seen great value so far is really thinking creatively with cities and towns, and sometimes even whole states to look at where are some areas where there might be transportation gaps. Is there a area or a space within a city that could use another gap of a transportation alternative. And we believe in building also unique partnerships with cities. So beyond that, beyond just sort of providing a solution, a transportation solution, we'd like to work with local businesses to get creative in how we can build around a business, build around an event, and so we like to think about different ways that we can be in a city long term, not just for the fun and the thrill of riding a scooter. So, yeah, a little bit of glare here. So again, we believe the future of micromobility and why it matters, it's to just get folks out of their cars, to get folks more active. We see in cities where we currently operate, like University of California, San Diego, Oklahoma State University, DC, Denver, Detroit. These are all communities where we operate right now. We see that the best way to go into a city is to work in a collaborative approach, to think about the city's needs beyond transportation. Are there workforce opportunities where we might be able to bridge a gap, provide employment opportunities for folks locally, and so that is Spin in a nutshell. We are here today and really happy to be a partner here today and welcome you to demo our scooters. Safety is paramount for Spin, and it's why we've established partnerships with companies like Overrad, which we provide foldable helmets. So if you would like to see a foldable helmet, we would love to get you on our scooter and also let you try out our foldable helmets at the same time. Yes, I know that was very quick, yes. So it's called Overrad, Overrade. If you get my card, I'll send you a link so you can get a discount if you're interested in ordering a helmet. But it goes up like this. The sides push in, and it collapses just like this. And you put it right into your bag, and you go. And we have a partnership like this because we want to encourage people to wear helmets. And this is a way. This is another way. A station or Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of the ways we're always thinking about different ways that we can try to solve some of the problems that we're seeing in cities across, people not wearing enough helmets, parking issues, things like that. And so we've been working to develop these partnerships with other companies so that we can figure out how to address these from a more innovative perspective. Yeah. Sure. So yes, the speeds are usually set by the city or town where we are operating. Usually that ranges somewhere between 10 and 15 miles per hour, but we can set them in our scooters and limit the speed caps. Yes, yes, I was just about to say, I will repeat the question. The question was, how do we educate our riders on how to maneuver around seniors and folks that might be moving a little bit slower on the sidewalk, while we do not encourage our riders to ride on the sidewalk. We really spent a lot of time educating our riders on how to spin safely. That includes riding in bike lanes when bike lanes are available. We also encourage them to get off your scooter and walk around more sensitive areas, or just even areas where the sidewalk might not be stable, because we have those across Boston and in the area. And then we also really take safety seriously, and so if we do observe riders who are not complying with whatever the rules are of the community, we do issue violations. And we want to work to help enforce safe riding. Yes, I believe I had you next.
So how successful have you been in terms of getting riders to leave the scooter out of the way of pedestrians? Because we have a pilot going on in Brookline now, and that seems to be the key concern residents have.
Absolutely. I actually was at the Brookline Community Forum where I was able to hear a lot of those concerns. And one of the things that we've actually been talking to Brookline about is parking solutions that Spin offers. We have a partnership with Swift Mile that we're currently piloting in 2 cities across the nation, where we're testing out docking stations that are rechargeable. We also have worked with cities to develop drop zones and parking spaces. So those are 2 things that we, I think, could really assist for communities like Brookline. I believe you were next. Yes.
First, I want to commend you greatly for having respect for customer data. That is a rare thing.
Thank you.
Second of all, I'm curious about, I know a lot of people think about micromobility. What is your, I hear some things that sound like competitive advantage. I'm thinking what you have that your competitors don't have, or vice versa.
Yes, and I think what I have found, at least in listening to communities, because Spin often, if we're being truthful, we're often not the first ones in a city or town. And so usually when we are coming in, we're usually hearing the concerns that they've had with other companies. And so with that, we're able to sort of assess and deliver solutions that might help address some of the issues that are already on the ground, like parking and appropriately parking. We've developed parking solutions. How we are a partner in the enforcement side and user education. And so those are I think the 3 primary reasons, but I think the main reason that sets us apart is that we never launch without permission. Yes.
So first, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I also echo this woman's concern about scooters being older. My primary concern is people with disabilities and people who use mobility devices because they have a disability. So I hear you on these potential solutions, but where's the enforcement place? And also, I'm assuming there's some good GPS, especially with devices. So are you all alerted when a scooter is left
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your statement there.
Are you all alerted somehow when a scooter is left walking, say, a sidewalk, or cut, or
So right now our technology only has it GPS tracked. So it'll say it is on this street, and it gets kind of like when you use your GPS in a mapping system. It's never quite precise yet. Our engineers are working on that every day.
The limit on GPS is 10 feet at the very, very best optimal conditions. It can't be more precise.
Yeah. So it's hard to get precise, but what we do encourage, and a lot of the companies have this too, is that we have a feature where you take a picture at the end of your ride, and if it is parked inappropriately or if we didn't get the picture, then we will issue a violation of some kind. And after 3, we have the ability to ban the user from our service because we really believe in parking appropriately, not blocking sidewalks, not blocking tow zones and fire hydrants, and I mean the list goes on. And so we want to promote fun, but we also want to promote safety and being a good neighbor. Are there any other questions? Not yet. None of the scooter companies are operating yet in Boston and Cambridge, but there are 2 operating in Brookline right now. Our plan is to launch. Hopefully soon in Brookline and beyond. Yeah. Yes.
So this is more of a comment. They and other people are the fleet vehicles for the scooters and whatnot, but there are lots of people that have private scooters already. So we shouldn't conflate the 2 discussions. The ownership and the actual use are similar, but scooters are here, whether they're you guys or someone else.
Correct. Thank you. Yes.
I'm a former DUI first offenders teacher, and I'm concerned, with all these new devices that people use them responsibly. You have all the marijuana shops coming in, and I don't know if there's any discussion with your users of, just not getting high or drunk and getting on the outside. Well, it's an important mission.
No, and we agree. Before a user can even operate our scooters, they have to consent that they have understood and that they agree to the rules of the road. And of that includes operating sober and operating responsibly. And so we do our part to try to provide the education, but like cars and like every other mode that we use, we can encourage people to wear helmets, we can encourage people to wear seatbelts, etc. But there will inevitably always be somebody who is not doing right. And so we're also just working to discover and find more ways that we can engage people on the safety topic.
Maybe they do it right by them, not by you. That's a little judgmental to decide for other people what's right for them. Well, it's for the safety of the scooter user and people around. I was there in college, and then people around. I'm not talking about you.
Yes. I'm happy to speak with you more offline, but thanks so much, everyone, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So nice to be welcomed. We had a public forum last Wednesday, so, I'm still recovering. So yes, in Brookline, because we try to take as much public feedback as possible, and because it is a pilot, we, had a level of you don't know what you don't know. So we tried it, and a lot of the feedback was about, ways that we could try to improve and some of the things that we really need to turn our attention to. So that's always productive and hopefully will end in a better result. So just let me describe myself. As Craig said, I graduated from Kennedy School, but before that I had a master's in transportation policy. Transportation is something that I've always found very fascinating from the age of like 10. I grew up in Portland, Maine, and one of the earliest public policy debates that I remember was the question of whether or not to widen the Maine Turnpike from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, just from the New Hampshire border to Portland. That's 42 miles. And even at the age of 10, I realized that we're not talking about just capacity, another lane. We're talking about whether or not we want other people coming into our community. Do we want to incentivize it by making it easier to allow people to come in? And that is kind of the subtext behind a lot of transportation policy, is the ramifications of who gets to do what, where. And so that's why I've chosen this path, this profession, and now select board in the town of Brookline. So I just kind of want to throw it open to you guys if you guys have any questions about the pilot program. I have also thoughts on micromobility or other transportation issues. So don't be shy. Raise your hand. Yes. So the question was, what were some of the comments that we were? Okay, yeah, I'll do the 3 most common feedback comments that we've gotten, not only at the forum, but we also have an email address that we've been soliciting. The number 1 issue is how to get people to stop using the sidewalks and to start using the bike lanes. So when I helped draft the pilot program, I thought I was so smart because I was like, ooh, I'll just say they can't use the sidewalk. And I'll just say you have to wear a helmet. And of course, everybody will do what I say. The helmet thing is another comment that we get quite often. And then the third one that I don't know whether or not other communities just haven't really been reporting this problem, but it is something that we just had a big blind spot in the town of Brookline, was underage use. So we made our pilot program 18 plus. And I just spoke to the city of Rochester, New York yesterday, and their state law is actually going to allow for 16 plus. And I don't know how I feel about that, but I know I've received some comments. A lot of people are very much against it. People who are young should not be using these devices. But then a lot of parents say, my kid has grown up on a Razor scooter. They are more equipped to ride this device than I am, and I've had a license for, eons, but I don't feel stable on this. And they're more likely to wear a helmet because they grew up in a generation that has really indoctrinated helmet use more than, I would say, my generation or the generations that are older than mine. And, well, so a lot of the companies were surprised by the underage use. And I think it's because there was an assumption made that you have to have an ID and you have to have a credit card or some sort of debit card in order to become a user of the app. But in Brookline, we have a lot of younger people with access to debit cards. And so they've been able to use the app more than I think other parts of the country. Yes, sir.
Just to add to the comment, because kids can bike under 18.
Yes.
So why would they think they couldn't do all this other micromobility under 18?
Yes, and that is a big public policy debate. How closely aligned do you make micromobility come in with all of the bike regulation? Is it absolutely the same, or is it nuanced? And where possible, we tried to make it the same. But by deviating and saying, okay, because my understanding is the helmet law in Massachusetts, you have to wear a helmet if you're under 16. You can ride a bike as long as you're under 12, like on the sidewalk. And by deviating and saying we have to use a helmet, you can't be on the sidewalk at all, regardless of whether you're in a commercial zone or you're in a residential zone, we've made it murky for the police to enforce. They don't know where it differs from current bike law. So we've had to overcome that enforcement challenge. Yes, sir. Appetite? Yeah, no, enforcement is actually one of our, probably the biggest challenge right now. Well, that's not true. Yes. Yep, I wrote 35 thank you notes to the officers who came up. We have a system of reporting, like what kind of traffic stops and things that officers did during like either a detail or their regular duty. And I said, wherever, the word scooter appears in their logs, give me the name of the police officer so that I can write them a note reinforcing that this is something that is important. Community, that I would have to check on. They are stopping people and making sure that they have to wear a helmet and that they are not using the sidewalk. But yes, compared to the number of traffic stops for motor vehicles, it is not in the same realm. But your point about traffic cameras, that's another debate about whether or not we want to use video surveillance. And that, I know, is a third rail topic in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so I will not comment. Anita?
To what extent do you think that this new program is successful? And to what extent has the use of students supplanted the use of cars?
I can only go on what I think Bird did a user survey and they released the results last week. Now, I'll preface this by saying that the disadvantage of having a pilot that is in only one community is that the average trip length is still under a mile, where I see these types of devices really replacing trips that are under 4 miles, really the 1.5 to 3 mile range in an area such as Boston, Somerville, Cambridge, and Brookline. However, what they discovered was 20% of those users reported that they use this device in lieu of a motor vehicle. What is also interesting is 20% of their users also reported that it connected them to public transit. So for the people that say this replaces a greener mode, such as public transit or walking or biking, transportation is very nuanced. It's a true system, and some things are counterintuitive. So just because you think, okay, well, this is kind of like a bike, so it's just going to take a road from the bicycling community, it's not necessarily the case. We've actually seen an uptick in bike share use. So there are lots of behavioral things going on, and I forget the first part of your question.
How much use has there been? Do you have stats on that?
Yes, we hit over 50,000 trips, I think, last week going into the public meeting. I don't have the updated for today, but for a pilot program that is only within the jurisdictional bounds of Brookline, 50,000 trips with a fair number of unique riders to attribute to that. So it's not just one person, going round and round and round and round. Although I hear that these things are a lot of fun. There is a pent-up demand for something like this. I saw a hand over here.
This is a little bit of a nuanced question. As somebody who's an innovator, I don't always think about risk management as really issues, but it occurred to me that the convergence of somebody riding on the streets and there being a weird bump or pothole or something, and that somebody could sue the city or just kind of thinking along those lines. How does that get addressed, that convergence of things?
Ooh, that is a nuanced question. So I'll take it in a couple different parts. One, when I came onto the select board, I realized there's a lot of Massachusetts state law. One of those things is an indemnity with that cities and towns in Massachusetts, and I actually believe this goes to state agencies as well, like MassDOT. You can sue any one of those municipalities or public entities up to $100,000, and that's it. We are indemnified, anything above that. That keeps your taxes lower, but compared to, if you were to calculate the cost of lost revenue for a person aged 21 for the rest of their life, how do you monetize a life? It's well over $100,000. So that keeps the cap low. However, I have been talking to a couple of insurance agencies that are looking at this not only in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but nationally. We do need to have a conversation about what this looks like to be insured. Zipcar, I only know this because I'm a Zipcar member, builds in their insurance into the hourly rental rate. So do we do that for these shared mobility devices? Is that something that we need to do? Because accidents will happen, injury will happen, and we need some sort of mechanism to right a wrong.
A little side note, I just was at the Cambridge Innovation Center and Venture Cafe a couple weeks ago, and they had a kind of a co-working space / community startup thing of insurers insuring innovations. It's like a whole, so it might be useful
Yeah.
if you know those folks.
And I think Craig and I disagree on this topic. I believe that separated bike lanes will be the thing that really makes, this kind of mode safe. I believe Craig is really concerned about the corners. That's where a lot of accidents happen because you have a lot of different modes converging at the corner: pedestrians, bicycles, delivery trucks, cars. Yeah. So, yes, in the black. I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Yeah, we see this at toll booths. Yeah, one of the main reasons Massachusetts went to all electronic tolling was because of the accident rates at toll booths. You had people slowing down, and you had toll workers kind of crossing to get, to their lunch break or to another booth. Anytime you have different modes, pedestrian, car, and there is a change, that's where accidents tend to happen. Yes, in the front.
Getting back to the scooters, I think I read that there was a problem where people were parking them. Is that one of the real items that people were discussing?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So parking remains a big issue. We only have about 250 scooters permitted in Brookline. When you look at other municipalities across the country, they're, above 1,000. So parking, I think, has come to the forefront in many other communities. It's on my list, I think it's the third out of the top three. But we're looking at geofencing as a result of a lot of the public feedback that we've gotten to try to, what it would do is it would create zones on each street, primarily in the commercial districts when you have a lot of competition for not a lot of width and sidewalk, where you would be told you can't park here and then you have to park over here. So we're going to play with that before the pilot ends to see whether or not it's something that helps with the parking situation, but doesn't detract from, the experience of getting people to where they need to be. Right now, the app for, I believe, both Bird and Lime require you to take a picture at the end of your ride to document that you parked it so that there is a 4-foot wide clearance and that is not obstructing the sidewalk right of way. Yes.
Have people with disabilities been involved in this discussion about one and in the
So the question was, have people with disabilities been involved in the discussion and specifically the commission? So one of the select board members serves on our commission, and he definitely weighed in on the pilot language. A lot of the rules around parking took that feedback into consideration. We will definitely be soliciting a lot more feedback. So the user survey that a lot of communities that have done only survey the people who are using the devices. When we do our user survey, we're going to try to solicit feedback from all kinds of groups. I've gone before the senior center a couple of times, but we're going to reach out to just about any institution in Brookline, as well as any groups that typically have a table, say on, like an occasion on this. We have something called Brookline Day, which is hosted by our Parks and Recreation, and tons of grassroots community organizations have tables at that event. So we'll be doing quite the outreach to make sure that we get, a broad range of perspectives before this thing is done. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But surprisingly, we've gotten more complaints about turkeys. Yes. Sorry? Riding the scooters? Actually, I've only ridden 2 times, mostly to see whether I liked Bird or Lime, and I won't say which one I like more. But I'll tell you, doing this, public policy job, hobby, in riding in a bike lane in Brookline, I fought pretty hard to get this pilot program, and then I put my helmet on and I jumped on one, and I'm like, wow, this bike lane is really not adequate. You got parked cars, you got people double parking, the paint is fading. I didn't realize that we put all the utilities basically right where the bike lane is, so all the potholes pretty much in the bike lane. So I would like to see complete streets and bicycling infrastructure. Craig is envious that we're doing the pilot program. I'm envious to see that the Cambridge made an ordinance that required bike lanes, for all new construction. So it's a system, and as everything kind of unfolds, hopefully it will all get better for all users. Yeah.
I don't know how to ride a bicycle, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but it seems to me that when you go on the bicycle, it's much higher, it's much more dangerous, you go at a higher speed. And I tried riding because that wasn't able to. But it seemed like it could just step off. I felt safe to try. I wouldn't try the bicycle, but I think give it a shot to try. So 2 questions.
There's so much there. One of the things that I really want to zero in on is that a lot of people make the assumption that everybody knows how to ride a bike. Yeah. My roommate is also one of those people. She grew up in China, and just, you don't have a dead-end street that you get to practice on. She was mugged outside of our apartment on Longwood Ave in 2012, walking back from Children's Hospital where she was a researcher. And she didn't feel safe walking that 20-minute walk after that. So she bought herself a Razor scooter. And that's how she get back and forth from Longwood Medical Area. That definitely had a profound impact on me. And was one of the reasons why when I started to see these things pop up all over the country, I was like, we need to experiment with that and see whether or not there is this latent demand. I saw a hand. Okay, so last question, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm just sort of curious as you're trying to balance all the elements of this and in these times of challenge for the retail environment. Have there been conversations about, with all these dedicated bike lanes and modes, the notion that pedestrian visibility across the street and access retail stores instead of just only once at every corner, like the more you're able to cross move back and forth across the street, the better it is for the overall vibrancy of the retail environment. So that, I'm curious whether that's been part of the conversation.
Not really, but what I'll say for an example, there's a JP Licks in Newton, and I know this from a work colleague, that didn't want to give up the parking space right in front of their store, which is very common, and for a bike rack. And as soon as they got the bike rack, they saw a huge uptick in their sales revenue. Yeah.
Got more pedestrian than bike, pedestrian's ability to get across the street instead of having to walk up the block, a full block, and then cross the corner.
So are you looking for more crosswalks? Yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that everybody understands the rules of where everybody has the right to be. So we can talk offline. Okay. All right. Great.
Reese from Somerville Electric Vehicle is next, and there's the policy side of things, and then there's the making the stuff side of things. And these guys, along with a whole bunch of other people that are here, are making the stuff, and this is the stuff that is going to make our future. So come on up and...
Okay. So thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to Councilman Kelley, and thank you to the wonderful folks at Biomed Realty and everyone for putting on this new urban mobility event. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, some of you, who we are, what we do, and why we're here. So Somerville Electric Vehicle Company, we are a electric vehicle company specializing in micromobility. So that makes sense we're here so far. Checks out. But our unique angle is that we use our entire fleet has a removable battery. And so we see ourselves as more batteries as a service for micromobility applications. And the way this works is, I think that, it's a funny angle here, but I think you guys can see a kiosk there. And so this is our battery swap kiosk. You can think of it almost as a vending machine for batteries. And so the idea would be that if you're riding around on one of our e-bikes or e-scooters, electric mopeds, and you're running low on charge, instead of having to find an outlet or have your charger close by, you just pull up to one of our battery vending machines, swap out your drained battery for a fresh one, and hit the road. And so it eliminates the wait time to charge, and we think this is the future of doing things. We think that people are going to get tired of plugging in their EVs and waiting for them to charge. And as long as we still have that against the electric vehicle industry, internal combustion engines still seem very, very appealing, because with those you can just pull up to the gas station, go 0 to 100% energy in under a couple minutes. So this is kind of getting the same effect and giving the same advantage to electric micromobility. But I want to back up a little bit and explain how we got to this point. So my wife and I, we are the co-founders, Natasha. And actually, I think she's on the schedule here. So if you haven't figured out, I'm not Natasha. I'm Reese. So she's the one out there that's, she's watching our booth out there. That's the booth with the tiny green electric car. If you haven't seen it yet, stop by and say hey. But we're both battery engineers. That's our background. We've been working in battery research. Myself, I've been in battery research for 11 years. She's been in battery research for about 8 years. And so we're coming at this problem from the perspective of someone who's been on the forefront of battery research for the past decade plus. And let me tell you that the chemistry is not going to save us. It's not going to save us in time. What we have right now, lithium-ion technology, that's pretty much as good as it's going to get for the foreseeable future. There might be things out there that will surpass it, but we still have a good decade of development to get there, and before it's even commercially ready. So what we realize is that we really have to rethink how we treat batteries, how we think of batteries, how we handle batteries, because batteries can do all the things we need them to do. They can meet the energy needs we have. It's just a matter of working with batteries and designing an infrastructure that exploits their strengths and downplays their weaknesses. And so that's the SumEV kiosk. This is what we came up with. And so handling batteries in this way, we charge up batteries under the most ideal conditions to maximize battery lifetime, battery performance. While the battery is being charged in this kiosk, this vending machine here, we have 5 different metrics we monitor that are all indications of battery failure or battery degradation. And if any one of those 5 metrics is flagged, the battery's pulled out of service until we can inspect it and send it out back into the world. And so this allows us to offer the safest absolute batteries in the industry, the most reliable batteries, most reliable energy for micromobility applications. So right now, we kind of have 2 paths that we're going down. One of them would be selling a battery swap kiosk in a fleet of electric bikes or electric scooters, electric mopeds, to organizations that are based in crowded, densely populated metropolitan areas as a solution for parking, for their employee commutes. The idea would be we go up to the Philips or the Amazons or BU or MIT and say, if you let us install this kiosk on your property, you can buy this fleet of 30, 50 e-bikes or whatever, and now all of a sudden your employees, your members have this resource here where they can just come back to for reliable batteries every time. They're coming back to the same location regularly. And so all of a sudden it opens up a lot of opportunities to people that otherwise might not have them. And the other angle that we're going at with this is partnering with a lot of the folks that are here, shared mobility folks. And so you can imagine something like this paired with a shared electric bicycle next to one of their docking stations. Have this right there. And so you can keep these vehicles on the road and keep them ridden without having to, we've all seen the dead birds lying around, the scooters laying. When they run out of juice, they're just there until somebody comes by and has to actually pick them up and take them somewhere else and then charge them and then pick them up and then take them back there and drop them off. Well, this would keep the vehicles out in use in the world and just swap out the batteries. So that's our angle. That was a lot of rambling there, but I want to open this up to any questions people have. Generally, yes, sir.
Just in terms of standardization, how difficult is that? Because there's so many different manufacturers, and what I read is that every company's got a different battery that isn't compatible with the other.
Certainly, that is a hurdle we'd have to get over. But I will say to that end, we did a lot of research before we deciding to go with the battery and the e-bike model that we currently have out there, which we have a prototype out at our booth. So if you guys want to stop by after this and check it out, it's right in front of the little green car. But we chose a battery form factor, and it's called the Silverfish form factor. And we explicitly chose that one because it fits into dozens of different types of e-bikes and even some e-scooters and electric mopeds. And so there is a bit of a few options up front there for people who want to partner with. They don't want to stick with our one model. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. One, what is the difference between iterations that you found with the product in terms of, the iteration, I guess? And then the other question, where did you got your funding from?
Okay. Second question is going to be easy to answer. No, we're actually currently seeking funding opportunities right now. We're seeking strategic partnerships. Although right now we've just been bootstrapping. So, the first question, what have I found the difference between the iterations? Could you maybe expound upon that a little bit when you mean?
I'm not an engineer.
Okay.
There's iterations of technology. And what do you notice the differences?
Oh, with like lithium-ion batteries in general.
Necessity to change to an expert.
Right. So you really, if you've been following lithium-ion batteries and lithium-ion industry, really since its inception, the improvements are incremental. They've been 2% here, 5% there, and it's improvements in all different avenues. Like some are improving safety, some are improving energy density, some are improving cycle life, battery life. But there hasn't really been a 2-3x kind of multiplier in this industry, really since its inception. I would say, and this is just me putting on my battery researcher hat for a second, I would say the things that I would put the most stock in as far as a big chemistry change for rechargeable energy, our batteries, would be maybe something that's polyvalent ion. So right now lithium ion has a 1+ charge. If you could replace that with a thing that has a 2+ charge, you could effectively fit twice as many electrons in the one spot. There's a lot of other scientific hurdles that come along with that, unfortunately. And I worked at a company that tackled this problem, and we gave up after a while. But it's still not to say it can't be done. It's just it's a long road to hoe there. The other one I would say would probably be maybe something a bit more exotic, like conversion electrodes, which is a whole different type of chemistry than lithium. But again, there's a lot of R&D that needs to go into that before that's even feasible. Yes, sir.
In New York City, I think the New York legislature just passed something that legalized e-bikes for the first time. So if you were able to provide a battery solution for New York City, because a lot of the delivery people already use it, what would your ideal way to enter New York City be?
Man, that's a great question. First off, we'd love to. So if you know anyone knows anyone, put us in touch. Okay, I'm writing that down. Jefferson, write that down. That's a great question. I mean, and it kind of ties into a bit of our question of where do we approach first? What's really our beachhead? What's really gets us this foothold here? And the best way would be to go through the municipalities themselves. But as I'm sure most people in this room are aware, there's a bit of, it's not an overnight process. There's a bit of a relationship building there, and conversations need to happen before anything can really come of that. And the alternative would be to go through private industry. And so, like, if for example, if we wanted to start selling our e-bikes to delivery services in New York, we could sell them to delivery services and go to, say, gas stations and say, hey, basically treat it like a vending machine. Like, would you let us put this battery vending machine on your property? The benefits to you would be, you would get more customers coming through here, recharging, and so that'd be more people on your property that, possibly spending money. And so that might be a good place to start for us in a more practical sense, would be starting off with like private organizations, private properties around town that would be willing to have this traffic through there and that would actually appreciate that. Yes?
So I know this is a micromobility event, but when we talk about batteries, one of the big steps we could make in air quality improvements would be batteries for delivery trucks and these larger diesel vehicles. Are you working on that? And then on the other side of things, not to bring leaf blowers into the discussion.
Well, please do.
But to use these sorts of batteries or smaller lawn equipment, is that something you're also looking at, and are the technologies and possibly the vending applications
Certainly, all the above. So to address the first question of the shipping air quality trucks, replacing that, I think that is something that we've kind of looked into a bit. Amazon's doing their privatization of their delivery, kind of like last few mile delivery right now. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but they're franchising that now, and so you can become an Amazon deliverer. And right now the requirements are having a specific type of van. At least if you're not buying it from Amazon, a specific type of van. But we think, however, if they would be open to it, we think there's a really strong case for replacing these kind of van deliveries with a fleet of maybe half dozen or so cargo e-bikes, because those you can move through town a lot more quickly. You can divide and conquer. It's a lot greener, and all sorts of advantages. But it's almost at this point with that conversation, it's a matter of getting the first kind of proofs of concept out there to convince them that this is a safer option, a reliable option that they could actually make money from. The second question for the lawn equipment and stuff, and that ties into groundskeeping on golf courses and even golf carts, which my little green car is pretty much a golf cart. Certainly, we would love to. We'd love to go down that path, and that would be great because a lot of that, I imagine at least, would be the equipment would be either contained in a place where it's not moving far from there very often, or it would be on the back of a trailer where they're going to and coming from, and so they could have a kiosk with them or have one of their main base of operations. But certainly, that would certainly be an avenue that we could go. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Certainly, yeah, certainly, and there have been a lot of improvements in lunch to make sure I'm looking good on time here real quick. Oh, okay, I should wrap up soon. Probably my last question, but there have been a lot of improvements recently with the engineering and the packaging of batteries to mitigate that problem, but that really kind of speaks to a larger problem, which is, unless you have an option out there where your customers or your users can swap out this energy source readily and easily, then what you're going to try to do if you're a manufacturer is try to cram as much energy as possible in this little thing so they don't have to charge it as frequently. And so it's a lot of these problems are spin-offs of trying to cram so much energy into this battery, into this one thing, because you don't have this swappable option. And so for our batteries, for example, they don't have to be quite as big as you might want to make them if you were selling an e-bike to people, because you would have access to these fresh supply of batteries. And so it would cut down on a lot of those issues. So I think that's probably my time, right? Is that? Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next up is my friend Julia from Flycycle. And all this new technology, it turns out, doesn't have to have any moving parts. And Julia's going to talk about something that I find honestly really, really exciting, which is new ways to think about bike storage.
Thank you so much, Craig. Thank you for inviting me to share a bit about our work with you. And thank you for hosting this event, and to Biogen as well. I will share with you today a little bit about what my company, Flycycle, has done to address the bike parking issues in Cambridge and Somerville, and also share with you how we're thinking about the future of bike racks. How did I get into bike racks? I never thought I would be here talking about bike racks today, honestly, if you had asked me a few years ago. But one of the problems that I faced as a cyclist in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, is that I really struggled in locking my bike up. Riding my bike around was great. I got there faster than I ever could have gotten to any destination in any other method of transportation. But actually locking my bike up made me feel like I was doing something really wrong. And my bike would be turned over when I got back, not able to get my handlebars through the bars of the rack, or not able to lift my bike. I have a pretty heavy cruiser, and even though I'm pretty tall, and I used to go to the gym before I got into this bike rack business, it's still quite a big of a lift to get your bike up to those vertical style racks. And some racks, and actually Craig was kind enough to share these photos with me, don't even really strike me as actual bike racks. So why is there all this diversity, and is there a way to actually design a better bike rack? Luckily, the city of Cambridge a couple years ago hosted a competition called Better High Density Bike Parking for Kendall Square. And this competition sought to address the issues of needing to park more and more bicycles as more and more people choose that method of transportation, and also to do it in a way that is accessible. So with the bounds of that design brief, we designed this rack, which is outside for you to try afterwards. And our goals in this design challenge were to address, first and foremost, the needs of the cyclist. So something that's accessible, that won't leave your bike turned over when you get back to it, and that is overall easy and pleasant to use. But we also wanted to address the needs of our actual potential customers, who are property managers. So here we're designing for sort of two different and potentially very separate groups: the cyclists, the users, and the customers, the property managers or property developers. So our rack looks like this with a single bike on it, or like this with two bikes on it. And the features, if I can, sort of a weird glare here, but the features are as follows. First and foremost, we want to stabilize the front wheel. So we provide this ramp and a cradle where the front wheel of one of the bikes can slide up and not risk twisting, which usually leads the bike to turn over. On the other side of the rack, a bike can park with two wheels on the ground, but the rack is long enough to allow both bikes to get up close to the rack. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So critically, the lift allows the handlebars to be staggered, and you're not competing for the tight space, or you're not competing for space at the part of the bike that is the widest. This system allows both bikes to live closer to the rack itself. So because we're eliminating that extra space that might be taken up if your handlebars are blocking someone else from getting close to the rack. And then this allows us to have more access around the racks and around the bikes. And in fact, that was enough for us to be able to install the racks in parallel and save 6 inches of space. So this is the way that we were actually able to identify or to address the high density aspect of the challenge. We made the racks more efficient so that they could be as accessible as other racks. In Cambridge, the guideline is for 36 inches of horizontal space to exist between the racks on center if they're installed in parallel to each other. We were able to get that number down from 36 to 30. So that's a savings of roughly 20% of horizontal space. So, it's very difficult to see the screen, but we've tested this rack with a lot of different styles of bikes. Today, we were really excited to test them out with the electric bikes. And also, different size bikes do work on this rack. So addressing what Craig keeps challenging us to think about, how can we retrofit the racks that we have or create new racks to be useful to the much wider types of micromobility devices that we're seeing. That's something that we're thinking about. So bike racks can be beautiful, and again, we're designing for people. We first and foremost want to make cyclists have a delightful experience when they're using a rack, and anyone else who gets close to them too. But what's next? So this is what our company has been able to do so far. We've been lucky enough to have a few installations around Cambridge, Somerville. We've been picked up in one or two locations by the MBTA, and we're very fortunate to be in a community like Cambridge and Somerville that cares so much about supporting local businesses and also this subject in particular. But what is next? With bikes becoming hopefully a much more ubiquitous form of transportation, how are we thinking about this piece of critical infrastructure when the need for them is just going to skyrocket, hopefully? And how can racks contribute to a pleasant or positive experience of the city? So we're looking at how bike racks can provide an aesthetic value and increase illumination around places where it may be needed. We're looking at how they can charge e-bikes. I should probably speak with some EV after this. They're right next to our stand outside. One of the challenges here, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, is the lack of standardization and types of chargers for e-bikes. So that's definitely something that I think not just us, but a lot of companies who are looking at this issue are dealing with. And we're also looking at how bike racks can track who's using them and when. Not necessarily who at a level of an individual identifier, but how often the racks are being used, what time of day, and how can campuses, like think about MIT or BU or any of these large medical areas, how can they make sure that they're providing enough bike racks at the right time? So we're looking at incorporating sensors that can detect when a rack is there, when a bike is parked, and when it's not parked at one of our racks. And we're doing this under the guise of Project Lightning Bug. This is our first prototype. It's installed in outside of Aeronaut Brewery in Somerville. Thanks to a forward-thinking property owner called Rafi. They manage the property now known as Summer Nova, used to be Ames Business Park, where Aeronaut, Brooklyn Boulders, Artisans Asylum, and other businesses live. And so we are in collaboration with Summer Nova, and as well as a Internet of Things company called Optimus Systems. We've installed two of our interests into our first prototype. So we've installed a lighting aspect that is sensitive to riders approaching the rack, as well as a motion detector that can tell us when the racks are being used and when they're not. We're using an Internet of Things device called Particle, which is a new form of technology using mesh networks to relay information from the racks to a central gateway where we collect it. So that's it. Happy to take any questions. Yes?
Thinking about safety
Mm-hmm.
and about this moment thing, if you like running. And I don't know if you speak the time when a mugger or somebody that's not so great a person would strike a person at that bike rack. But with the Internet of Things, I wonder if there could be some kind of sensor that could tie into like police department.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right. Right. So the question is, how can these racks also play a role in keeping people safe when they're out and about? That's a really interesting question. We've thought about it more as how to keep bikes safe rather than people. There's a company called Reggie that gives you, I believe it's like an RFID tracker to put on your bike, and if it gets stolen and then picked up somewhere, it records information about who the owner is and enables police forces around the nation to get it back to you. So that's a potential feature that we're considering. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so the question is, are the racks intuitive, and if people use them in a way that we haven't thought about before, do they still work? Yes, absolutely. And so to the first question, are they intuitive? I think we have sort of mixed results. It makes me really happy to see people use them for the first time and say like, oh, my wheel should go here. And so I think maybe about like half of the people who see them on their first try get that, and other people may need a model to follow, or they need to see it parked in that way in order to get the idea. But yes, as you brought up, people will park their bikes in any which way. It could be because of accessibility. It could be because they want to lock their rear wheel instead of their front wheel. And fortunately, we've had many experiences where we've seen people park in a way that we would have never imagined. And fortunately, I think a marker of good design is that it allows people to do with it what they want to, and it will still work. So we've experienced our racks to still work. You know, you can still lock your bike up to it, even if you put it sideways, upside down, around the corner. Does it turn out to be the most efficient way people could possibly use it? No, but it still works perfectly fine as a bike rack. Yeah. Yes, sir. We've been lucky to get onto the City of Cambridge's pamphlet of accepted bike rack types. Currently, I believe those other accepted forms include the lollipop. Unfortunately, because I think that's actually sort of a less than ideal form of rack. The inverted U. And I believe there's one more that's maybe like a sort of a variant of the inverted U. And so we're on there as well as sort of like a non-traditional form of bike rack. I will say that the city, most municipalities have very tight budgets. And so our racks are manufactured in the United States, in Pennsylvania, by a Dutch Amish factory. So it's a very nice story, and they have been angels in working with us from very, very small scale to larger orders, which is why we began working with them to begin with. But it does mean that we are not competitive price-wise. So that's, sometimes we will give, very, very good deals to municipalities. The MBTA, for example, has picked us up in a location because we were able to make a pretty good price cut. But, we're competing on, where we're made, and also the amount of steel that goes into the rack itself. So I would say that the lollipop is a great rack for if you want to just park one bike on it. But if you want to bring another bike and have it find enough real estate to properly lock up, you're going to need more bike rack real estate. I know we're short on time, so I would love to chat with you afterwards if possible. Thank you. Thanks.
My name is Saval, Boston Orthopedic Respiratory Equipment. We are a durable medical equipment company that also do scooter rentals, scooter sales, scooter repair, and we specialize, thank you, appreciate it. We specialize on the mobility scooters and mobility assistive devices for people with limitations and also people that, that need assistance walking. I mean, you don't need necessarily looking to have limitations to be assisted for, a mile or two, that you could probably do it on the train or Uber or Lyft. You could actually do it on one of the portable devices like this. And, some of the people, maybe, I see all these Lime scooters and two-wheelers and Segways. Some people maybe not feeling comfortable to be on the two-wheeler, so they could jump into the three-wheeler or a four-wheeler. So basically, we are entertaining this idea in Boston hotels meanwhile, and then we're trying to bring it into the streets. So, and the actual intention is, to save the energy and, to save the physical environment, and, I mean, the regulations are vague at this point throughout the city, so, we don't know whether we should be staying at the sidewalks or we should be staying outside the sidewalks. The FDA allows us to be at 4.75 miles per hour at the driving range, which is, reasonable. They can be programmed for higher, however, the FDA would not like that. But 4.75 miles an hour, and you're looking at about 11 to 50 miles driving range on these units. And three-wheelers, four-wheelers, they can do the job. You want to get from point A to point B, especially universities, schools. These are doable. And as far as batteries, I've heard some of the guys here, they're inventing battery ports and battery chargers. These work with a standard 110 volts, and the amperage on these are 24. You're looking at the 24 volts and 12 amps. So these batteries are universal. They're interchangeable. So, batteries could be changed at any point. Chargers could be used as standard ports. These are, I mean, we're in process of actually making a plan of how to make it happen this way. Scooters could be parked at at any point, just like bikes. And as long as we have a battery charging person that go in and swap the batteries, I mean, these scooters could be actually utilized, through certain stations from point A to point B, but it will get you to the destination. It will save, the hustle of a T, the escalator, the elevator, ADA. There are units that are 120-pound capacity going all the way to 700-pound capacity person. So if you have somebody that's extra heavy and trying to make their way all the way from MGH or Mount Pioneer back to Cambridge, they could do the job. And these seats are swing away. So this way, it's an easy access. And if you have somebody falling on the street, instead of calling a paramedic team, they could be transferred to the device and be transported on their own. And operational controls are pretty easy, pretty standard to use. And I think that's some of the batteries could be actually elevated. I mean, some of the scooters, this is not the model. The model here, if you see there's a handle on the battery, down the back, could be picked up, stored elsewhere, or replaced by the train pack. And they're pretty good on one charge up to 12 miles, which, I don't assume to people to do any more mileage, throughout the day. And, you see these guys in Stop and Shops, you see them in malls, and there's no reason that they could not be on the street. When it comes to snow, there are all-terrain units that could be available. I mean, it's a risk for a person, again, to be, just like you're driving a car through the snow or the ice, but the units could be handled on that. The only problem is sand. You can't really use them on the beach. Beach units are different units, different tires, but yeah, as far as access, streets are pretty much accessible with the incline and decline ramps. If you see, most of the streets have access. It's just, for people that don't have access in and out of the house, when we're not looking to be inside the house, most of the end users that are using the units inside the house, they have their own access. And they probably have a portable ramp, a modular ramp, or elevator. Questions? Go ahead.
Are those all weather, so you can leave them out in the rain?
I would say some of them are. These are weather terrain. Yeah, these are all weather ones. Smaller units are tougher. So again, they're electric. So yeah, if the batteries get wet, yes, they may get stuck. Yeah. So when it comes to rain, portable units are not the way to be. However, these units are pretty durable. I've been doing this for 17 years. I haven't seen much hardship as far as handling the standard rain. If you're talking crazy rain, yeah, basic vehicles get flooded. So, yeah. So it's when the actual water would get under the shroud. I'll let you pick that up so I can show you. I don't know if it's visible enough. This is the metal shroud. So if the water gets into the controller, yeah, there is a problem. So, but again, you're talking about five inches on clearance, ground clearance. So if you're talking about the heavy rain, heavy flood, yes, it will get stuck. But yeah, as far as just the basic rain, what we've seen yesterday, that's decent. So that will handle the job.
Can't hear you when you're not on the mic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can hardly hear you.
Do you want me to repeat it? Okay. The question was about whether they could handle the rain or not. These are pretty standard units, and these could do the rain. The basic rain, yes. When you have more than 5 feet of snow, yes, they will have some hardship. They could get stuck. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'd love to see docking stations where you charge, maybe lights docking stations, or have you done any work on that, or spoken to anybody about that?
It's in process. Yeah, we are working on it. We are working on the plan. Yeah, there's no plan in there yet. Yeah, I am working on the station, on the development of the station, and I am working on the tracking platform. Yeah, that's all on the process. We don't have a tracking platform as of yet. Yeah, as I mentioned, we've been in business for 17 years. We've been renting these for past 9 years in Boston hotels. We haven't seen much problems as far as people stealing the units. We've had issues, but not. When we talk in ratio, probably 3%. However, we're still working on the tracking devices and the actual charging ports. What we've developed so far, we had developed the portable charging stations we have it inside of vehicles that we do deliveries with. So when we deliver these units, we have a portable charging station in the vans. We haven't done anything that's outside because it's all governmental permits, and that territory is vague. But yeah, it's in process.
So I wonder if you could collaborate with some of the
It's a project. It's a project, but it's under development. It's an idea. I can't even call it under development yet. But it is an idea, but it's not implemented, and it's in process. Go ahead.
Can you ride it at night? Doesn't it need lights?
It does have a light. It does have a light, and you use it at lights.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Pretty, I mean, it's decent. It's not as bright as we want it to be, but again, there are some units with much brighter light, but yeah, you could ride it at night. But again, it's at the point of risk of the end user, and there's drivers on the streets that are tough. Any more? Go ahead.
Are there like, red lights in the back at night or signals or?
It's not really lights. It's kind of the basic reflectors. But yeah, some units do come with the lights. Yes. Yeah. They have the turns. Yeah. These are bigger units. You're talking about 4. I think I have a picture. Not in this picture, but there are units with the directionals. Yes. 4-wheelers. Any more? Or cutting off on the time? Okay.
It turns out that there's a storm that looks like it's coming in. You'll see some of the tents got blown over. So we're trickling down a little earlier than we had hoped, which means we're pushing the last round of speakers up ahead. So we're going to have Stephanie come in just a moment. You're welcome to come back and take questions until she comes in, or not. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Groll, and I'm from the Cambridge Community Development Department. And I'm here to talk about the new mobility blueprint study that we are working on right now. Okay, so clearly the way we travel around our city and the region is quickly changing. And between all the new travel options that everyone out here sees today and constantly evolving technology, it seems like there are new headlines every day. So I'm just going to run through a few of them just to bring everyone up to speed on what's happening. So this week we learned that Uber is offering is offering their Boston customers a new service to look at their Uber app and get information on public transit routes and pricing and times. So they're starting to merge public transit together with Uber. We're seeing more and more scooter share companies introducing a rugged scooter compared to their earlier lighter weight scooters, and this is going to make them last longer and potentially help them reach profitability sooner. The scooter companies are also starting to consolidate. So originally Bird was not chosen as one of the scooter companies to operate in San Francisco, and so what it did was buy one of the companies that was allowed to operate, and now Bird is operating in San Francisco. Yeah. We've learned from Uber's IPO that the company sees itself as a substitute for public transit, and they're working to capture public transit riders right now as one of their avenues towards profitability. And then on the other headline is about the Minneapolis bike share system. They started with a similar system to Blue Bikes, where it's a docked system, and now they're shifting to dockless so that they can expand the system more quickly, and they're using virtual parking hubs, which they're trying to expand without the chaos that's associated with a lot of the dockless bike share that's out there. And then we have to think about automated vehicles. So when automated vehicles become the way that ride-hail trips are provided, so Uber and Lyft using driverless cars, we're expecting prices to drop by 80%, which will make it even more competitive with public transit and will potentially pull riders off of public transit even more. Another effect of driverless cars is that they may drastically cut the need for people to get their own auto insurance. So really big auto insurance companies like Lloyd's of London are totally revamping how they're doing insurance. And this is in response to the driverless cars. In the middle, you see that Toyota is set to introduce a ton of new EV, electric vehicle models in 2020. And on the right, we get into something a little bit more futuristic, which is retail companies and delivery companies like FedEx are all throwing a lot of money at developing bots and drones to do their deliveries. So these technologies are so far from what we see on our streets right now, until recently with the scooters, and it's all unregulated at this point. And that means that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So there are a ton of great resources out there about what the future of mobility will look like. They tell us that we can expect transportation to be automated, electric, shared, include micromobility options like you see out here today, and include a lot more deliveries and moving freight around our streets. The futurists make the case that we stand to gain on improved safety, accessibility, convenience, and affordability, while enjoying lower greenhouse gas emissions. But they also warn that cities really need to take an active role in guiding this transition towards the new mobility, because if we don't lay a thoughtful groundwork today, we could really find ourselves facing a future where we have more traffic, more harmful greenhouse gas emissions, and exposure in our personal data, and services that are too expensive for people with low incomes to afford. So, how do we get the future that we want? Luckily, Cambridge has a long-standing commitment to creating a transportation system that meets our community goals and includes options that are easily accessible, low cost, they have low environmental impact. And these are some goals that we established through the Envision Cambridge planning process. And they start with safety and equity, and they continue all the way down through creating a transportation system that is carbon neutral. And now the city is creating a new mobility blueprint. And we are trying to answer the question, how can Cambridge use policy and regulations to support new mobility options that advance our transportation, climate, and community goals? So this blueprint is going to be a methodical, data-driven effort to position the city to better plan for new mobility. And we want to be in the position where we're not reacting to every new thing that's coming along. We want to get out ahead of it and get some solid policies in place. So sometimes it's helpful to talk about what something isn't, in order to get a sense of what it is. So the blueprint, it's not a visioning exercise. We're looking for very concrete steps to further our planning around new mobility. We're not creating any new goals. I talked about the Envision Cambridge goals, and we have other city policies already on the books, so we're looking to fit into those goals. And because new mobility is changing so quickly, it's not going to be a static document. We're going to be updating it as the mobility landscape changes. Some of the modes these are the modes that we're looking at. So with ride hail, that's Uber and Lyft, and others that might come along. We're looking at trips that are taken alone and trips that are taken with other passengers. We're looking at car share. So one-way car share is where you would pick up the car in one place and drop it off somewhere else, and station-based is where you pick it up and return it to the same parking space. Automated vehicles, both single occupancy, shared, if it's available as a system, and then we have to think about zero occupancy vehicles, so cars driving around with nobody in them. We're also looking at AV shuttles, and then e-bikes and e-scooters, which is relevant to today. People privately own them and ride their own, but then they also use the shared systems. There's a bunch of other things on there, but let me just mention the vertical takeoff and landing devices. It sounds crazy, but it is right around the corner. Uber is going to offer this through their app. They are estimating that a trip that would take you an hour today will take you 10 minutes and will cost about $100 because it will be really subsidized to build demand for it. And there's a lot of money being thrown at research and development for these vehicles. And if you have 19 hours to spare, you can watch a YouTube video. If you just Google Uber Elevate, and it's where their industry is going. These are things we need to think about now in order to plan for it. So here are some of the things we'll get out of the blueprint. The city manager has appointed a technical advisory group so that we can work with the community to help us work through each of the pieces of the blueprint. We're starting with the transportation trend analysis, so we're looking at what's on the roads today, not just roads, but walking and biking, and how we think that will change in the future. So we're looking at some projections, and then we're going to feed that into our strategies and actions to allow the city to shape how new mobility is introduced here. And then we're going to pick a few policies to really focus on and get very detailed with. We're also developing, as part of this blueprint, a residential EV charging pilot. So this is really aimed at people who want to own an electric vehicle but don't have a driveway or a garage to charge in. We think that this is really constraining the number of EVs in our city, and we're just grappling with the question of, how should the city provide the charging for people? We don't provide the gas stations, but maybe there are other goals here to support. And then we'll also be trying out innovative ways to get the word out about new mobility options and get feedback from people on how they're experiencing it. So, sorry.
Sorry, did I just interrupt you?
So what he's going to show is the project workflow for the project. So we're underway now. We're going to have, and our first advisory committee meeting is in July. And we expect the project to wrap up within a year. Can you just go to my last slide? Oh, there. Okay, good. So the last thing, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a scooter pilot in Cambridge. It's very clear that that electric scooters, both ones that people own personally and through shared services, are a really important part of the transportation system, and we're very eager to allow companies to operate in the city. But we need a regulatory framework to ensure that the safety of the people on the scooters as well as the people on the streets and on sidewalks. So Cambridge has worked through MAPC with Brookline and Somerville and Boston on state legislation to regulate scooters and other micromobility vehicles. The legislation is pending right now. Operationally, they would be regulated as bicycles. And I was going to say that we don't know when it's going to be passed, but it sounds like it's possible that it will happen before the summer recess is over. So any day now, we'll have scooter legislation passed. And we are also working, Cambridge is also working with the same group, Somerville, Boston, Brookline, through MAPC, to get aligned on the basics of what our scooter pilot would be. So we have a lot of questions to answer, and we want to make sure that a lot of these rules are the same across town boundaries, so it's not confusing for people riding, because if you go from across town boundaries, you're probably not thinking, oh, now I'm in a different city. You're just having your ride. So the questions we want to answer include things like how many scooters will be in each municipality and across the whole system. Can you ride on sidewalks? How do we make sure that they're deployed equitably? Will they run through winter? What sort of data will we receive? And how do we protect people's personal data? Questions like that. And we intend, I was going to say we intend to launch our scooter pilot as soon as the legislation is passed, but if it's passed in a couple weeks, that's not going to happen. But we will be working really hard to launch this pilot as soon as possible. So if you want to stay in touch on that issue, you can come to the next City Council hearing on the scooter pilot, which is on July 15th from 4 to 6. And I'm not sure what room it's in, but I'm sure it will be on the city website. And that's what I got. So you got Does anybody have any questions?
Do you have like a detailed understanding of how many people are actually moving through like each of these towns?
So we're, each of the towns. On scooters?
Like what is mobility? How many people are moving from one side to the other? And then what is the transportation options you can give them, like to protect the bike lanes or things like that?
So that's a great question. We, as part of the new mobility blueprint, we're looking at how people are getting around, walk, bike, transit, driving. And our consultant purchased data for Cambridge. We don't have data for the entire region, but we do have some analysis about from the American Community Survey, which is done through the census, about how people are arriving here for work trips. But the other trips are.
Well, the MPO thing, somebody like in this day and age, the fact that the planners do not have accurate transportation data is like actually disappointing. You know what I mean? Like this, you can buy it from marketers today.
Yeah.
A very small amount of money. Like, isn't anybody doing real detailed planning of how many people are coming from Somerville to Kendall Square?
So we have a lot of data through the Parking and Transportation Demand Management Ordinance, where we received information through annual surveys. So we do have that information, and we can work with the MPO to get data from them. But purchasing the data through, the cell data that you mentioned, the reason we purchased Cambridge only is because it's very expensive when you get to broader areas. Well, I will definitely talk to the MPO. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming this beautiful Saturday, spending your time here giving support for all these startups, city, in order to improve our transportation ecosystem and consequently improving the life quality here in the city, right? And before starting, I just want to let you know and reinforce that I'm from Brazil, so I have this crappy accent, and I speak fast. So if you guys don't understand, not much I can do. Actually, no, you guys can ask again. I'll try to reframe again so you guys can understand. So basically, we believe that it's going to be the sum of all these services, these all different companies working together with the city that will create a real meaningful impact in order to improve all the transportation ecosystem, right? And you guys have seen different types of transportation model serving different purpose, different usage case, and different distance, right? We have the bicycles that the average distance used by the users is 0.9 miles. Electric scooter that is for the average distance used is 1.5 miles. And the target, what we are serving for our users is somewhere between 1 to 5 miles. So there is a lot of that spot transportation zones not covered by public transportation, right? And using these actually mini electric pods is the ideal. So let me just take a look. Yeah. So similar to the dockless mini electric scooter, the electric scooter, this is our electric scooter. The only difference is our mini electric pod, right? So the concept is pretty much the same. Let me just take a look here. So if you compare this distance from somewhere between 1 to 5 miles in dead spot transportation zones, using the electric pod will be faster. Faster than taking public transportation, will be way cheaper than taking a taxi or even Uber. And it's more convenient depending on weather condition and the distance as well. If it's too far, maybe walking or taking a bicycle, it could be too far. So we have a very good example here. I don't know if you guys know Greentown Labs. It's a very great co-work space, and it's located in the middle of nowhere. Actually, it's in Somerville. It's also a very great city, but just the location that it is situated is not very accessible, you know. And these are a real example. If you want to go from here, Cannon Square, to Greentown Labs, taking public transportation is going to take 30 minutes plus. By car is 15 minutes, around 15 minutes plus looking for parking space. And if using one of our vehicles, it's just going to be faster. This is for time saving, right? It's going to be faster from all these alternatives. And in terms of cost, we are also, as I mentioned, we are way cheaper than public transportation. And it's more convenient depending on the weather condition again. As you all know, we are here in Boston, in greater Boston area. Winter can be a little bit cold. So you're probably not going to ride a bicycle or a scooter when it's snowing or raining. Or even if in a very warm days or very hot days, you don't want to get all sweaty in a meeting or in a classroom, right? So overall, we are more convenient as well, working in this range of 1 to 5 miles. I have a short video here. Not sure if it's going to... Let me see if I can... Just in a second. I think it's not going to upload, but this is just for you guys have an idea of size of the vehicle. But it's right here in the corner. So a regular vehicle, park it horizontally, it can fit 3 of our vehicles vertically. So it saves a lot of space. And last, one of the slides that is also not pulling out is just reinforcing the distance that we are working. So the average distance used by our users has been 2.6 miles. It's exactly the range that we are serving. So it's a perfect fit for all these sport transportation zones. And it's really easy, very user-friendly to use. You basically download the app, you book the vehicle, you unlock the vehicle, you have a lot of fun riding one of these vehicles. I promise you're going to have a lot of fun. It's really cool. Maybe if you are shy, it could be a little bit uncomfortable because a lot of people will try to stop you to ask what is that, or even wave at you. So my tip is if people wave, just wave it back. There's not much you can do. And then you just conveniently park the vehicle in one of the designated parking spots. This year, we weren't able to renew the resident parking permits with Cambridge, but we are working on it. And we are always open to give any feedbacks. So feel free to stop by if you have any question, complaints as well, or know any investors, feel free to touch base. Thank you very much.
Ivan, can you explain the importance of having access to on-street parking for your program to work?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think one of the biggest benefit of the free float model that we say, or it's the dockless, is the flexibility. So it's all about convenience and flexibility. You know, price is already very low because it's electric. So the operational cost is just really low to charge an electric vehicle today. That's why we only charge 20 cents per minute to use the vehicle. But the other greater benefit for that is the flexibility. So you can have the freedom to park the vehicle at any spot in a city. You know, otherwise you lose the benefit of iteration between spots. And this is very important to open the possibilities from trips A to B.
So, what happens if you can't get on-street parking permission for your use?
That's a good point. You can always you can always try to partner and get some designated parking spot, but it's an exponential possibilities of trips connecting points. So if you limit to a couple of specific designated parking spots, you lose that benefit. So you lose a lot of purpose in terms of possibilities to drive the vehicle around the city. So that's actually essential. Otherwise, it loses the purpose of the service. Yeah.
Actually, market for this, have you thought about adapting it to full facilities? So, for example, making it so that you can wheel up a wheelchair for your
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Have you thought about adapting this vehicle for people who use wheelchairs?
Yeah, we would say that would be like our second phase. But for now, as a startup, we have to also looking at the business perspective. We always want to improve the probability of success of a company, and definitely the biggest demand for now is for regular users. But I think there's a lot of value for wheelchairs as well. Yeah, I would say it would be a second stage maybe because there's gonna have a lot of adaptation to change the layout of the vehicle. Yep.
Can I ask you what the reason
That's a good question. I mean, we know that inside the city there's a lot of stakeholders. They are all, as Stephanie mentioned, they are working a lot to improve all the transportation ecosystem. We know there's a lot of stakeholders, and also in order to avoid any gray area to operate on it, I think everything has to be very well discussed and very clear, defined with the city. So we're currently working on that. So it's just part of the process, we believe.
That was factful.
Yep. Thank you very much. So feel free to contact me. You guys will find me also on LinkedIn, or Councilor Kelley also can share my contacts as well. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So again, my name is Jenny Larios Berlin. I am one of the co-founders and COO for Optimus Ride. We are a full-stack self-driving technology developer. And just sort of the summary of today's presentation is, if you really want to get to fully self-driverless vehicles, the mantra is, to be fast at driverless, you have to go slow. You should go slow speeds, and you should go focused environments. So that's a little bit of what I'll talk about today, and I'll share with you in this presentation. So we are a MIT spinoff. We all met at MIT at different schools, some from urban planning, some from business, and obviously some from the technology schools. We started in 2015, and since then we've stayed in the area. We've moved to this zone here. Can you guys hear me if I just project a little bit more? Because I like to be more in the audience. Oh, I can take that. Okay, great. I like to be more in the audience, and I like to be able to point things out. So this area here is Boston's self-driving testing zone. It has been so since 2017, and it's actually an idea that came out of Boston's 2030, which was their large initiative to think about the future of mobility. This area here is where we're based. We have an indoor test track where we can do a lot of early testing. And then we can drive the cars off the ramp, focus here. And then this area here, which is sort of the Seaport Innovation District, most of that is owned by Massport, and we've been collaborating with them to extend our testing across to that area as well. So, like I was telling you earlier, self-driving technology is complicated. There's a lot that needs to be done before we can even get to a fully driverless environment. There are plenty of companies that are doing autonomous vehicles, right? So the vehicles can drive themselves, but no company in this industry to date has been able to remove the safety driver from the vehicle. For good reason. It's going to be like that at least for another 10 to 50 years, depending on the complexity that's being addressed by that particular company. So, you know, the reason that self-driving is difficult is not just because of the technology. It's because of how we deploy it as well, right? I mean, these are things that are going on public streets. These are things that are dealing with, you know, big robots that are thousands of pounds huge, right? They can hurt people. So the way that this is done has to be methodical. It has to be well thought out. And so you need people that have understanding of all of the different complexities of self-driving technology in order to be able to bring it to market in a safe and responsible way. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the co-founding team. So this is Ryan Chin. He's our CEO. His background is actually in city science and thinking about smart cities. So Bill Mitchell, architect, previous dean of the MIT School of Architecture and Planning, was his advisor and one of the early thought leaders to coin the term of smart city. And really thinking about what is the technology that is needed to make a city more sustainable? What is the technology that is needed to make a city more equitable, more accessible? And so that's sort of the frame of mind that Ryan brings to the company. Then you have Sertosh and Albert. So they're both technologists. How many of you are aware of the 2007 DARPA Urban Challenge? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So the original DARPA challenge was just to navigate a vehicle through a route outdoors. And the urban challenge followed and was, can you find your way through an urban environment with the specific urban challenges, pedestrians, those kinds of things that aren't in the desert that you had in the original challenge.
Exactly right. Thank you for that. So that was in 2007, and they were classmates at MIT at CSAIL, and so they led the robotics components, so path planning and control of the robot. And Albert led the vision or perception, i.e. how do we help the vehicle see what is around in the environment so that then from a robotics perspective, we can inform the vehicle on how to guide itself around that environment and what it sees. So they were classmates then, and now he is a professor at MIT in Aeroastro doing autonomous drones, and Albert is our CTO leading the charge from the technological perspective. And then you have Ramiro, who has worked with major municipal transportation projects. So he actually helped fund the first subway line for the city of Quito. So thinking about urban infrastructure and public financing, and how do you get all of these different people to the table to really make this type of technology work? And then myself, I used to work at Zipcar. How many of you have had a Zipcar membership in the past? Great. I mean, what was really exciting about that technology was it wasn't sexy or anything crazy, but it was how do we enable folks to really share an asset and start moving away from this idea that I have to own everything, but that all I really need is the usage for that particular experience. And I had to work a lot with cities and public-private partnerships to really figure out how to best bring this and deploy this to communities. So what I'm saying here is, if you really want to understand the deployment of fully driverless vehicles, you have to be able to understand all of the different constituencies that you're working with. You're working with policymakers, you're working at policymakers at the city level, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level, on top of also being able to make the technology work in a way that is safe and sustainable. So here's an example of the DARPA vehicle that was the MIT challenge. It was one of the finishers of that competition. What I want to point out to you here is in 2007, in order to make the vehicle fully autonomous, you needed all of these sensors. And you needed so many sensors that they had to add an air conditioner on the vehicle to keep the computers cool, and they had to add a generator on top of the vehicle to power the air conditioner to keep the computers cool. And so what's exciting, and part of the reason that we're even able to have a self-driving industry today, is because all of this has now been miniaturized. So this is an example of a Velodyne puck. These are the types of sensors that we use in order to help our vehicles perceive the world. This is a LiDAR, so essentially it's a radar with lasers. And then this is an NVIDIA GPU unit. And this is the processing power that it took to do all of this back then. So that's the other thing that's exciting, is that there's just been some really great innovations on the hardware side that have enabled us to be able to sort of miniaturize it and be able to bring it into a vehicle, into a GEM or a Polaris vehicle, which is what we work with today. And then this is another project that we worked on, which is essentially the MIT city car. It was trying to imagine the car of the city, right? Trying to think about what is a vehicle that can move in an environment, that it can be safe and accessible. So what's interesting about this vehicle is that all of the different wheels had their own motor, which meant that you had a 0-degree turning radius, right, in order to be able to fit in small, congested areas. This vehicle was fully electric, drive-by-wire, and the door here in front actually flipped up. So the thinking was that the vehicle would park facing the sidewalk. You'd get out, you'd never have to be on the road, from sort of a safer way of engaging and being able to dismount from a car. And it's also safer for bikers as well. So those are the types of things that we've been thinking about that have sort of brought us to want to even start this company. So let me just start off by sort of describing what self-driving vehicles cannot do. They cannot go from Harvard Square to Times Square today by themselves. Impossible. Nobody's done it. Nobody can do it. Waymo, who's been doing this for years, they can't do it. There's multiple things that are preventing that. One is obviously the complexity. Because when you're talking about the environment here and the different squares, the different types of lights, the different types of pedestrian habits, and then transition from that to suburban road, then transition from that into highway, and then transition from one state's highway to another state's highway system to another state's highway system. Now you're dealing with interstate travel, which now brings up the issue of policy. And now again, you have to get off of the highway and interact with a whole different set of other sort of nuances of that particular environment. So even on a clear, beautiful day, which we had earlier today, this would not work. Now add on top of that the complexity of snowy conditions or rain conditions. Just imagine when you're in a bike or when you're driving a car, it's complicated to drive when there's rain or when there's fog or when there's snow. Same thing for an autonomous vehicle. So these are the things that they can't do today at all, and it's going to take time, especially if you want to be able to have a self-driving vehicle that can do all of that. But what self-driving vehicles can do well is if you focus them, if you constrain the problem and you decide what's your area of focus. This is a geofenced area, so if you are able to select a particular area with which to hone in the self-driving capabilities, then you're able to understand the behaviors of that particular space. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you're in a community that has a lot of pets and you start to understand when the pet owners start to take their pets for walks, or if you are in a neighborhood that's very family friendly and folks like to go out for bikes with their kids or out on the stroller with their kids, knowing when and what are the most favored routes within the community is helpful, because then you can tell the vehicle how to engage in that environment at those particular times. You're essentially giving it the behaviors so that it can move itself in a way that is responsible and sensitive to that particular neighborhood's needs. So that's why a geofenced area, once you've constrained the problem, is something that can be done. The other thing that's not here, but obviously we've been hearing a lot about, is long-haul trucking. So if you're on the highway and you're driving across country and you're on Highway 66 and you stay there the entire time, that's pretty easy. But the moment that the vehicle has to get off of that highway and you're in a transition mode, you're going to need a human in that. We haven't figured that out yet. And again, it's that approach of constrain the problem, understand the particular use case, that can be done. The other thing that can be done is first and last mile. So the first and last mile is, how do we improve the catchment area of a transit hub? So most people are only really willing to walk 5 to 10 minutes to get to a subway line or a commuter rail. But if there is an access point, if there's some type of mobility that is able to connect people, then the catchment area for that public infrastructure use now increases. And the moment that that increases, we're now able to then support that public infrastructure even more and feed into it, so that then ideally we have a very sort of positive reinforcement loop where we have the funds that we can reinforce back and spend it into the public transit to make the system overall better. So that is something that can be done today. And that can be done with the technology that exists. So if you take LiDARs, which is essentially produces these kinds of images, okay? And the color that it gives you is essentially to give you a good understanding of the height of what you're looking at. This, combined with the actual camera data, now you can understand, okay, there's an obstacle here and it's in my way and this area can't go into, but understanding that it is a semi, understanding that it is a car, understanding that it is a biker, understanding that it is a pedestrian, then you can start to build the algorithms necessary to say, okay, well, those 4 things I'm not going to treat the same. right? There's certain behaviors from a biker that are not going to be in a car. There are certain behaviors from a car that are not going to be in a pedestrian. So that's why it's very important that you have sort of this fusion with camera data and the LiDAR data so that the vehicle can clearly see all of the things around it in a 360 view in real time, but be able to interpret it with the camera data. And so you essentially have sensors on the vehicle that then bring that information to the software, and then the software generates the response on how you should move in the environment based on what it sees. So what we try to do is we try to take a very sort of safe, sustainable approach to how we think about self-driving. All of our vehicles are sort of similar to the GEM that you saw here earlier today, either a 6-seater or a 4-seater electric vehicle. We believe that the shared electric and autonomous model is the way to go, mostly because, you know, for you folks that have used Zipcar or, you know, are interested in sort of the sharing economy, the more that we can get away from thinking about vehicles as an individual asset and more of a shared asset, the less that we need of parking lots and parking garages and so forth, so that we can actually reclaim land in the urban space for more human scale uses. It is electric because when you do that, you actually reduce CO2 emissions and make the overall system that much more sustainable. And autonomous because the moment that you can do that, you are actually able to cover a greater community. You can do it for longer. You can have a 24/7 service. And the goal really is for this technology to not racially profile. The goal for this technology is to be available and accessible, you know, to everyone. You know, one of the things that we've been doing also is working with the Perkins School for the Blind. You know, there's a spectrum of blindness, there's a spectrum of disability, there's a spectrum on even deafness. And so the more that we can understand on the edges of the use case and the need, the more that that experience that we design is helpful and applicable to everybody across the board. But it is very important that we understand those edge cases because they're the ones that stand to benefit the most out of this. And if there is a divide in terms of being able or willing to engage with this technology, then we're missing a great opportunity. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the things that we're doing with the sort of 55+ community as well. So these are some examples when I say geofenced. So master planned communities, business parks, ports, airports, academic campuses, those kinds of things. And so as I was saying earlier, you know, the fastest path to fully driverless is going to be slow. It's going to be a slow speed, so probably not more than 20 to 25 miles per hour, and it's going to be in these geofenced environments. Why? Because the moment that you do that, you have the opportunity to actually learn the nuances of that community, and then you can have other people come and take a look at that process and understand what was the rollout so that then you can educate both policymakers but also other communities on what that approach looks like and do the appropriate community engagement so that people can talk about the vehicle, see the vehicle, even before it's even moving in a community. So one of our first deployments after we started testing in Boston was in Union Point in Weymouth. So Weymouth has a commuter rail stop, and there is Union Point, which is right next to it. And there's about 1,200 people that are there now. Some of those are in a community called Faring Way. So Faring Way is a 55+ community. There are folks that live there that are, it's sort of a mix. It's folks that have either homes or they have condos, but then if they need to move to the assisted living care area, they can do so as well. Well, what's been really exciting is that they were the first folks to say, hey, we want to learn more, we want to have info sessions and so forth. So we've actually hosted a bunch of events at their community hall. And they were one of our first alpha users. Why? Because, you know, the moment that you engage with people and you demystify the technology is the moment that people are like, okay, I get it, I understand what you're trying to do, I understand that it's slow, I understand that you're trying to focus on a particular community. Let me see it. Let me see it in action. And so that's what we did. And so they've been some of our early users. And now we also have commuters. So we are doing first and last mile connectivity, trying to get people to use the MBTA commuter rail stop more. So we predominantly focus in the morning and in the afternoon, or rather in the morning commute and then in the evening commute. And then in the middle of the day, that's when we actually work with the Faringway residents. What we do, and this was a really interesting use case that we didn't expect, but basically they take us for a ride to the outskirts of the community and then they walk back. That's their exercise routine, because they can't do the full round trip walk, but they can do half of it. Which has been great. And then, we saw that there was a prescription or a pharmacy nearby, and so we've also been experimenting with them prescription delivery. So again, here's where you have an opportunity to understand the needs of the place, and then say, hey, we have this autonomous vehicle. Let's think about it as a resource for the community. How can we use this not just to move people, but maybe goods that are useful within that particular place? So that's what we refer to as fleet as a service, where you have a fleet that's dedicated to the community uses, and then you can either do one of two things. You can do what we refer to as sort of point-to-point autonomy, which essentially means that we look at a map within the community and then we say, okay, here are the specific nodes of where people like to either connect or like to go to, and let's build those into stops. And then we have a reservation system where people can select where they want to get picked up and where they would want to be dropped off, and that can be either within the community or connection points to transit, for example. Or we can do shuttle as well. The thing that I like about this approach is you have the opportunity to get to know the constituency and understand what they need. Since I would say the first quarter of this year, we've been working on a few other deployments that are sort of putting us in sort of a nationwide situation. So Brookline Navy Yard. So the Brookline Navy Yard just recently launched a ferry stop. And so what we're doing is we're trying to connect people, because that is a gated, fully gated, 24-hour gated access. So we're trying to connect people from the ferry stop, which is here, to the gates that are about a mile or so out from here, so that we can ensure that more people from the Brooklyn area are using this new mode of transport within the city. The second one is Brookfield. So this is in Reston. This is a corporate campus. And what's exciting about that one is that it's in the process of being redeveloped to a transit-oriented development site. So right now it is sort of your traditional corporate campus, but there is a subway system or a subway stop that's going to be launched there. And so for us to be helping them think about how they make sure that this area is developed in a way that it is walkable, that is human scale, and it's friendly. And then Paradise Valley Estates is a 55-plus living community. It is fully gated, and it is a private community for folks who want essentially a place where they can retire, and as they go through the different stages of life, through end of life, they have the care. So there's homes there, there's apartments there, there's assisted living, there's hospice, and they can essentially go through the whole thing. And they're looking to expand, and they don't want to add parking either. And they want to make it easier for people, for their residents to be able to get around. And so they see this technology as an opportunity to help educate their community members about this technology, but also address for the need of mobility within the space in a way that is, again, safe and sustainable for them. So this is just an image of that particular route. And this is the Reston Park. So how many of you guys are familiar with sort of the DC metro area? Okay, so there is, Dulles is one of the 3 main airports in that area, and they are trying to get a subway line, Silver Line, to go to Dulles, and they've been trying to do this for ages and ages and ages, and it was taking forever. So then the authority for the Dulles airport actually said, you know what, WMATA, we'll just do it. We'll just do it, and then you guys can take advantage of it because we need to get this line going. And so that's what's happening is in 2020, there's going to be this new subway line here. And what we're doing right now is there's a lot of folks that are being displaced. So these 2 buildings here currently exist. A lot of what you see here is totally new and is going to be developed in the next couple of years. But what that means is that the people that are there, they're being displaced. You know, they have to park at different places and all those kinds of things. And so as part of our support is we're helping to facilitate the process by connecting people that are in these offices to sort of their designated parking spaces so that we can make sure that the construction is happening in a safe way and enable all of the development while at the same time enabling it to be an active campus. And this is Paradise Valley. So as I was saying, it's fully gated. This actually is capped at 15 miles per hour. And you can see the design in terms of the different cul-de-sacs and so forth. And then in this area, so this is where all the homes are. And then here's what you would consider sort of the central business district or where all of the amenities are. And so and it turns out that folks have to come here at least twice a day for meals. And so it's a very nice way to get people to be social and engage with each other. But they don't want people parking here because they're quite parking constrained. And so the goal is for our service to essentially be able to connect people throughout the day and be able to bring them here, not just for meals, but whenever they want. And that's the other thing that's exciting is that if you can expand the hours of operation, it really is, you know, whenever you want to move around to access all of the different things that the community has to offer. So, I mean, in closing, as I was saying, I think I'd love to open and hear your questions because I know that there's a lot of sort of different thoughts around self-driving. But, you know, the thing that I'd like to, again, leave you with is that right now in the industry, yes, there's a lot of sort of autonomous driving happening, but there are no vehicles, none, that are fully driverless. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, especially for the organizations that are trying to help you have a car that can do what you do, which is if you want to hop into the car and you want to go visit friends, regardless of the weather, regardless of the highway, regardless of the types of road conditions and so forth, there's so much unpredictability in those types of environments that it's going to take time. You know, it could take at least 10 years, but a lot of people say 50. If you know John Leonard, he's, you know, one of the sort of pioneers of this types of robotics. He says not in his lifetime. So, you know, when we actually get to individually owned, fully driverless, that's a whole other thing. But what we can do and what we can try to bring self-driving technology to individuals is by constraining the problem. Slow speed and focused environments so that you can actually get to know a place and be responsive to that. Yes? Yeah.
Do you know of any sequel to that?
Do I have any what?
Do you know of any sequel to that? Has there been another? Is that something that's going to become a reality?
Yes. So the question is around long haul trucking, right?
There was a trip that was reported in Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago, I think. Cross country, the driver sat in the back.
That's right. That's right. So again, the driver is not going away there, but you are correct that the other type of autonomy that is possible today and in the short term is long haul trucking. But again, the way that that's going to be deployed is essentially saying. Oh, you mean in terms of another sort of display model? I think, well, it was a one-off because it was sort of a marketing ploy, but the truth of the matter is that that industry is moving forward, and so they are working with certain logistics companies.
So we will see that maybe in our lifetime?
Yes, yes, that I do believe you will see in your lifetime, just as I believe you will see fully driverless in communities in your lifetime. But individually owned self-driving vehicles, that's a whole other layer of complexity. Yes. There currently is, but what I'm arguing is that the path to get fully driverless in a controlled environment is going to be faster than the path to being fully driverless for a vehicle that has to be able to address for all types of driving environments. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, okay. But thank you for asking that clarifying question. How are we dealing with liability issues with our pilots? All of our vehicles are fully insured. We work with 2 different insurers for that, and they insure us. So they insure the vehicles through the company, essentially. Yeah, and we take full responsibility for the vehicles.
In your Virginia project, what's the operating distance? I'm not sure I heard. How long does it take to do a trip, and how much ground are you covering?
Yeah, so our trips are generally like about 1.5 miles or less. So you're looking at 3 minutes, 4 minutes of a trip. Yeah.
Are you running any issues with the low-speed vehicle part of it being on roads? Is there any difficulty with that?
Yeah, so the question is, has there been any difficulty regarding the speed of our vehicles with the environment? And the good news is that the areas that we're going to are low speed. So all of them, even in the Marine Flynn Industrial Zone in Boston, the speed there is supposed to be 20. Obviously sometimes cars aren't adhering to that, but technically they should be going at 20. And in some ways, our vehicle capping at the 20 does help sort of pacify the road a little bit.
Well, I actually run a small neighborhood bus in a section of the neighborhood of Boston. And most of our riders are going to like 2 or 3 locations from around the community. And I see that this has a really improved service. If we could deploy 5 or 6 driverless vehicles to get people from the different locations to the 2 or 3 they want to go to, it would be very effective. So the city of Boston is not allowing you to do any more experiments within the city?
No, they are open to it, and I think the goal is to find which are the best ones. So I'm happy to chat with you after.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
We would be interested in at least looking at it. It might not work, but we have so much traffic jammed up. Nobody goes over 10 miles per hour anyway.
Yeah, it's true. The city brought the speed down to 20, but the average is actually 14 because of all the starts and stops. Yes. Exactly. So in Weymouth, so the question was, in Weymouth, do we still have drivers in the vehicle? And the answer is yes, for 2 reasons. The first one is that we are sort of in that testing phase, which is why I do, but we are working towards the driverless. And then the second one is that the executive order that was signed by Governor Baker does require a safety driver in the vehicle at all times on public roads for Massachusetts. We have some videos on our website, but I think that those are external, not inside. But yes. Yes.
What would you say the criteria are for taking the driver out of the vehicle?
That is a great question. So a lot of systems engineering and safety analysis has to go into that. I would say that you're going to have to do quite a few miles of fully self-driving or fully driverless on a private site first. So not even with any cars. It has to be, kind of the outdoor test track that I was showing you. And you're going to have to create a lot of scenarios. Some of the sort of risk scenarios that you might encounter in these types of geofenced communities before you can even get to a level of comfort. And even I would say that once you start testing a fully driverless route in a particular location, you're probably going to start looking at, well, what time of day, what's the low peak, which portion of the route before you do the whole thing. So it is going to be a gradual, but these are some of the things that we've been thinking about that need to be sort of checked off first before having that. So that kind of gives you some perspective. But our engineering and system integrations team are thinking thoroughly on this, and there is a lot. But I think the key thing is, are we thinking about it, and are we having some good methodical questions around it?
So we're happy to take questions, I guess.
Yeah, great.
Who regulates what you're doing when you're doing these studies? I totally understand why you would do them.
who do you have to give the results to? I mean, if you're a drug manufacturer, you give it to the FDA.
Yes.
Who do you give your stuff to?
Yes, so I think you're touching up on a great point, which is there is no coordination at the federal level at this time. So that's the statement there. The NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they're trying to come out with papers and so forth to guide, but the truth of the matter is that policy right now is being made at a state level. And depending on how the state is run, if it's on a municipality level or if it's on a county level, that's where you're starting to see a little bit more detail on policy in terms of what do companies like myself and others have to report either to the county or the city or the state with regards to the testing that's being done. But that's how it is right now. Yep.
When you consider the diversity of your potential consumers and also thinking about accessibility,
Yes.
how do you decide where to test out these vehicles? It seems like you have a lot of like wealthier cities or aging facilities.
Yep.
And those may be wealthier communities, but how do you decide when thinking about lower income communities and where you go and test the vehicles?
Yes. So in terms of, oh yeah, actually, do you want to?
So kind of when you consider potential consumers and thinking about diversity and accessibility, how do you plan where you want to test out these vehicles? It seemed like a lot of the places you were testing them may have been communities with older adults, which may or may not be wealthy. But when thinking about lower income communities and how do you decide where you test these vehicles? Because everybody needs to kind of experience it, and the vehicles need to understand different behaviors that may take place in different places.
So as far as those pieces, we have been very sort of thoughtful about which private communities we're going into. And the reason that we've been looking at private communities is because then you can actually try to get to fully driverless because public entities and policymakers don't have access. So there is that piece to consider. At the same time, what we're trying to do is figure out with the city of Boston what types of learning experiences we can essentially create so that we can invite folks from different communities to get those perspectives. So for example, we participated in Hub Week last year and we offered free demo rides, and we really tried to get a really good representation of the Boston community, and not only did we do demo rides, but we also did a couple of workshops so that we could get a little bit of that perspective, because you're right, it's not just sort of the disabled community, it's not just the age community, but it's also sort of the diverse community. And the other things that we've been thinking about there is how do you access, right? Not everybody has a smartphone. So what about the digital divide? And when we were talking about the reservation system and whatnot, how can you use text-based models, with folks that only have texting for on their phones to be able to also access this. And the other things that we've tried to do is, for example, in Faring Way and so forth, we also tried to look at not just the people that live there, but what about the people that work there as well. So one of our early users didn't speak English. He spoke Spanish, and so it was a really great opportunity for him to have access to the service because we could connect him to his workplace from the commuter rail, but also to understand these use cases as far as how do we communicate, what are visual modes of communication where language doesn't have to be a divide, and what are the different types of tech that could be used in order to be able to have access to people. I want to be sensitive about people's times. I probably run way over, but if anybody has additional questions afterwards, thank you so much for coming and listening.
I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to thank Biomed for hosting, and Rachel and Mark and Joe and company for everything, the logistics and the taping and so forth. This is a conversation that's going to go on as long as we have transportation. So there's still food in the back, and keep the conversation going now and indefinitely in the future. Thank you all so much.